So in this module, we'll start looking at the options of this status bar, and we'll start with the first two options, which is grid and the snap mode. So here in this drawing area, you'll notice that by default it's completely blank, or in your case it may have a grid, and we have the UCS and the normal objects here. Now you can also add grid if it is not present in your drawing area directly by clicking this first icon, which is grid mode. You can also turn it on by pressing the F7 key on your keyboard. So here we have a grid which is mostly like a graph paper. So you can zoom in and zoom out to see its individual blocks. And now here we have these individual blocks. Now currently there are 5 blocks in horizontal and 5 blocks in vertical direction, and after every 5 block there is a major line in both the directions. Now these grids are helpful in creating lines and other drawings in Autocad, but you can also change the settings of these grids. So in order to change its setting, simply right click on the grid mode and select this grid settings. So now on this drafting settings window, we have lots of options. We'll simply select this grid spacing option. So currently you can see that the grid X spacing is set to 10 unit. That means the single box or the single grid here has a length of 10 unit in X direction, and also in Y direction it is 10 unit. Now here we have this major line every 5 blocks. So that simply means that after every 5 block in both the direction, we have this major line. Now if you want to change these settings, you can do that. So we'll change it for now. So I'll change the grid X spacing to 1, and also the grid Y spacing will change to 1. Now we want major line after every 10 blocks, so we'll change it to 10. And now let's click on OK. So the settings of this grid has completely changed, and now if you'll zoom in, you'll find that here we have these new settings. So now we have each block with length of 1 unit in horizontal and 1 unit in vertical direction, and also after every 10 block we have these major lines. Now there is one more option, which is this snap mode. So you can turn it on by pressing the F9 key, the function 9 key on your keyboard, and by using this snap mode you can snap at particular points on this grid. So we will once again change the settings for this snap mode as well. So I'll just click on it to turn it on, and now right click and select this snap settings. So now here we have the settings related to the snap, and in order to have a uniform value for snap and grid, we need to change the values for both of these properties. So in this case we have changed the X spacing to 1, and in this case it's set to 10. So let's now change it to 1 in this case also. Press tab key and the Y spacing will also change to 1. We'll see what this means in a moment. So now change these values and click on OK. Now select any command. For this case I'll select the line, and now you'll notice that our cursor behaves in a very random way. So even though I'm moving my cursor uniformly in the drawing area, it will only snap to the intersection of grid lines, as you can see here. And after every one grid line, the cursor will snap because we have changed its value in that way. Now let's say that we want this cursor to snap after every 2 grid lines or after every 2 grid blocks. So we can right click, go to snap settings and change it to 2, and now click on OK. And now after every 2 blocks you can see that it's snapping in horizontal as well as in vertical direction. So in this way you can change these values. Now how are these helpful? So first let's change it to 1 so that it has a uniform value. And now we'll make a simple geometry. So I'll make a simple rectangle in this case with a length of 10 and width of 5 unit. So I'll click on this point, and we don't need to be concerned about the point because it's exactly clicking at the intersection of the grid line. So now click here, that will be the 10 length, and also we have this 5 length, the 10 length and 5, and now press enter. So we can easily make this kind of geometry directly taking the reference of these grid lines or the background grids here. So it's quite helpful in making these kind of geometries. But for most of the cases I keep these settings off, and I also keep the grid off, and I prefer to work without these grids, but it's completely up to you how you use these grids. So that was all about the grid and the snap mode settings. In this video, I will tell you about the polar and ortho mode of Autocad. So on the status bar, you'll see here this ortho mode, and you can turn this ortho mode on by pressing the F8 key on the keyboard. So let's click on this ortho mode, and when you click on this ortho mode, you'll notice that the polar tracking will automatically turn off. So for now, we'll just keep this ortho mode on, and now let's go to the line tool and click at a point to start the line, and we have a completely horizontal line here. Now even if I move my cursor way beyond that horizontal line, it is still remains horizontal. Even if I move it to this direction, it will remain horizontal. Now if I move it close to this point, it will become vertical. So as long as ortho mode is on, the lines will always remain either horizontal or vertical, but you can obviously snap to any existing point. For example, if you move your cursor close to this point, the end point, it will snap to that point. But as long as there is an absence of snap point, it will always make your geometry in either horizontal or vertical direction. So using this ortho mode, you can make these geometries quite easily. Now let's erase it, and let's now turn on this polar tracking option. So you can obviously use F10 function key to turn it on, and as soon as you turn it on, the ortho mode will be off. Now using this polar tracking, you can create your geometries in any direction. So here also I've started the line, and I can create it in horizontal direction, and also I can create it in any direction. But there is a slight advantage in this case. In this case, when you move your cursor to the 0-degree angle, you'll see this tracking vector. Now this will help you in creating a completely horizontal line, because in the absence of this tracking vector, you won't be able to, or at least it will be very difficult for you to make a completely horizontal or vertical line. So let's now turn it off. And now let's try to make a completely horizontal line, and now you won't be able to make a completely horizontal line, or even if you will be able to make it, it will take some time. So this polar tracking will help you in making lines inclined to particular angles, not only in horizontal and vertical direction. So now let's turn it on, and now here we again have the tracking vector. So in this case, you can see that the tracking vector is only in this horizontal or in this vertical direction. Even if you move to any direction, we have it after the interval of 90 degrees, but you can change that. So let's say that we want this tracking vector to appear after an interval of 30 degrees. So for that, click on this small arrow right beside this polar tracking and change it to 30. And here we have this 60, 90, 120, 150 and so on. So let's click here. And now we have the first angle at 0, then the second tracking vector at 30, then at 60, 90, and so on. So after every 30 degrees, we have this tracking vector, and that will make the drawing workflow very easy, and you will be able to directly snap to those angles easily using this polar tracking tool. So when you go to this polar tracking, you'll see that you'll have lots of other options also. For example, the 45-degree multiples, the multiples of 23 and 18, 15, 10 and 5. So these are more than sufficient for your requirement. But if you want to add any custom angle, for example, let's say that we want to add an angle of 17.5 degrees. So that also you can do. So for that, click on this tracking settings. And now here, click on this additional angles, click on new and add the additional angle. So we need to add 17.5. Now press enter. And our new angle is added. So let's now click on OK, and now click on this arrow again, and you'll see that here we have this 18, 36, 54 and 72 angle. Although currently you won't be able to see the exact 17.5 degrees because precision of angle is set to 0, and we need to change that precision value in order to see the decimal points. So I'll just change that value. So for that, I'll press escape key and I'll type UN for units. And we have already seen this drawing units window. From here you can see that the precision for angle is set to 0. Let's change it to 2 decimal places. Click on OK. Now let's look at the angle value, and here we have the 17.5, 35 and its next multiples. So once again, I'll go to this line tool, click on any point, and from here I'll make sure that this option is selected. And now after every 17.5 degrees, we have this tracking vector. So let's make a line to an angle of 52.5 degrees and press enter. Now if you want to remove that value, you can again go to this tracking settings, and from here select the value, click on delete, and now click on OK. So in this way you can use ortho mode and also the polar tracking to make your drawings according to your requirement. I prefer to keep this polar tracking on, and I only keep ortho mode on in specific cases. So once again I'll remove these geometries, and that was all about the ortho mode and polar tracking status bar options of AutoCAD. In this video I will tell you about dynamic input status bar option. So up to this point we have been using command line for entering all of our inputs, whether it's the distance, angle, or the coordinates. But there is an alternate method of doing this, and you can do that using the dynamic input, which is simply a small command line on your cursor. So here we have this dynamic input option on the command line, and you can activate it by clicking on this option, or you can also use a din mode system variable. So you can change the value of this din mode system variable to 1 in order to make it active. Now once this is active, go to any command and now click, and now you'll find a slight difference. Now we have this cursor, and along with the cursor we have the command line input here. So the same input which is on command line can now be seen directly on the cursor, and along with that we have a dynamic coordinate here. So you can see that this coordinate display changes according to the movement of cursor. Now let's click at any point in the drawing area, and now the cursor again changed, and it's now reflecting a new value here. So now wherever possible the cursor will show this distance value and also the angle value, and as far as possible it will show other values also, for example radius or the arc length, depending upon the geometry. So now let's say that in this case we want to make a line with length of 100 unit inclined to an angle of, let's say, 45 degrees. So for that simply type 100, and now you'll notice that that value will be entered on the line field. Now simply press tab key and the distance will be logged, and the input field will jump to this angle value. Now enter the angle, which is 45, and press tab again, and here we have it. So now the geometry is logged to a distance of 100 unit and also to an angle of 45 degrees. Now press enter, and the final geometry is here. So this is a little bit simple method of making the geometries which you can use obviously, and depending upon the geometry or your preferences, you can either prefer this method or the direct command input from the command line. So I'll now press escape key, and I'll look at other options which are available with this dynamic input. So let's now move this geometry here, and now I'll go to this polyline. Now I'll click at any point in the drawing area and look at the command line. So on the command line we have some other sub commands or some extra options which are related with this commands, for example arc, half width, length, undo, and width. Now these options are also available on the dynamic input, and you can access these information or these options simply by pressing this down pointing arrow. So click on this down pointing arrow as mentioned on this tooltip also here. So click on it, and now all those options are available as a list. Now you can simply keep pressing that down pointing arrow, or you can also press the up arrow and choose the desired value. So I'll select this width option and now press enter. Now let's change the starting width to 10 unit and the end width to 10 unit again. Press enter. And here we have it. So now you can see that we can apply the same value directly from the command line. So once again, let's change the width to 0. I'll select the width value, enter 0 as the starting width and ending width also as 0, and press enter, and we have the normal polyline here. So let's now join it with the starting point and press enter. When making drawings with this dynamic input, there might be situations when this would create a little bit of distraction for you. For example, in this case, let's say that we want to make a circle at this point, but we don't want this dynamic display to be visible at this drawing area. So you can hide it also temporarily by using the F12 function key. So press the F12 function key while your command is active, and that option will hide temporarily. And now you can enter the values if you want, or you can again release the F12 key and enter the value. For example, here I'll enter 60 as the radius, and here we have the final geometry. So in this way, you can use the dynamic input option for bringing your command line directly on the cursor. So that will decrease your dependency on the command line, but obviously it is not a replacement for your command line. Command line will be required for many other situations also, but you can use it wherever you find it most helpful. So I'll just click on this option once again to turn it off, as I prefer working with the command line only. In this video, I will tell you about simple object snap tools. The object snap option comes into picture when you want to make geometries with respect to the existing geometries or their points. For example, here we have these geometries, and now I'll select the line tool, and let's say that I want to start this line from this endpoint somewhere here. So when I move my cursor close to this endpoint, this small endpoint box will appear, and also on the tooltip you'll see that its name will appear here as endpoint. Now even if I don't click on this exact endpoint, the cursor will still snap to that endpoint, and that's because we have this object snap option active. Now you can turn it off by simply pressing the F3 key, and when this option is off, there will be no point at all on any of these existing geometries. So now I'll simply click on this to turn it off, and now I'll click anywhere in the drawing area, and now I'll move my cursor close to the next endpoint, and now we don't have any endpoint or any midpoint or any other point here for the reference, and it will be very difficult for us to exactly click at the point. Let's say that I have clicked at this point. Now let's see how accurate I am. So I'll zoom into this area, and absolutely this drawing is not correct. We want to click at this point, but our geometry is here, which is not the correct one. So we need to ensure that object snap is always on to make accurate drawings. So now I'll zoom out, I'll remove these geometries, and now I'll click on this object snap option to turn it on. As I already mentioned, you can also turn it on by pressing the F3 key. Now there are a couple of points which are recognized by this object snap, and you can see all those points in this menu. So click on this small arrow, and there will be a list of points, and all of these points are recognized by the object snap. So there are check boxes or check mark in front of some of these icons, and some of the icons are without these check marks. So currently the object snap will only recognize the points which have these check marks, and it's always advisable to keep only the required number of check boxes active. So don't make all of these check boxes active, otherwise there will be a conflict of different object snap points. So for now we have this endpoint, midpoint, center, node, quadrant, intersection, and extension points active, and currently all of these points can be recognized by the object snap. So let's now go to another line tool, and now I'll move my cursor close to this circle, and here you'll see that we have this quadrant visible. Not only the quadrant, we also have this center point visible. Now all of these points are visible only because object snap is active. So let's turn off this center, and I'll repeat the command, and now I don't have any center point here. So obviously after turning it off, we won't find that, but still we have the quadrant and all the other points here, like endpoint and the midpoint here, which is indicated by this triangle. So you can keep other options active as well here. Now there is one more option here, which is a geometric center. So using this geometric center option, you can snap to the geometric center point of any closed geometry. So here we have a pentagon, and now when I move my cursor close to this point, you'll see that there is a new point here, which is the geometric center. So it's simply the centroid of this geometry, and you can find the geometric center for very irregular kind of geometry also. For example, here I'll make a drawing with polyline, and I'll make a very random geometry just like this. Now in this case also you can find the geometric center using that object snap, but the only condition is it should be closed like this, and it should be a single unit. Now I'll go to the line tool and move my cursor here, and we have this geometric center here. So in this way you can find the geometric center quite easily using this object snap tool, and you can also see some of the other object snaps like the node, which is simply a point which we have already seen. So you need to make sure that point or node is active in order to snap to it. We have the quadrant option, which is the quadrant of this circle or an arc. And we have the intersection. So intersection is simply the point which is something like this. So in this case, we have these two lines intersecting, and if you want to snap to this intersection point, make sure that intersection is active. And now when I select any command and I move close to this intersection point, there will be this intersection object snap. Now let's look at some other options here, and we have the extension here. Now using the extension, you can create any line or even an arc in the same direction, or you can extend that geometry. So I'll select the line tool for explaining this, and here we have this polygon. Now let's say that we want to extend this line, and for that I'll just click at any of its endpoints and now move my cursor in its direction, and you can see that we have this extension on the tooltip, and also the cursor is moving exactly along the direction of the line. So that's simply extension. You can also use this extension for an arc. For example, I'll select the arc tool here, click on this point, and now let's see here. So we can see that this geometry is extending exactly along the circumference of this arc. You can access these object snap options directly from the right contextual menu as well. So in the situations where there are plenty of object snap points and it becomes a little difficult to select the exact snapping point directly from this object snap menu, then you can use the alternate method, and that's the right contextual menu. For example, here we have this circle. Now let's make a line also in this case. So I'll click at this point, quadrant, and I'll join it with this point. Now in this case, we have the midpoint of this line exactly on the center of the circle. So I'll simply move this line a little bit towards left, just like this. And now the center of this point is very much close to the center of this circle. So now I'll go to the line tool, and now I'll try to snap to this point. And now if I move my cursor, I can only snap to this midpoint. Although I don't want to snap to the midpoint, I actually want the center of this circle. Let's now check whether we have the center active or not. Yes, we don't have it active. Let's make it active. Now move here. Now again we have the midpoint here, although I have turned it on, but still we have the midpoint here. So in these situations you can use the right contextual menu. So for that, simply press and hold the shift key and then right click. Now you'll see all the object snaps on this list. From here, select the object snap which you want to choose. For example, in this case I want center, and simply go to that point, close to that point, and it will snap only to that point, ignoring all other points. So in this case, I am now able to snap to the center, and here we have the geometry. In the previous video, we have seen some of the basic object snap points, and in this video we'll explore some of the advanced and typical object snap points. Now here we have this object snap active, and if it is not active, you can click on this status bar option to turn it on, and we have the list here. You can also turn it on by pressing the F3 key. So now in this list we have seen up to the extension snap points. Now we have this insertion point, which is simply the base point of our blocks and the external references, and that we'll see later on in this course. We have the perpendicular object snap. Now for accessing rest of these options, I will not select this menu. Instead, I'll select it from the right contextual menu. So let's look at the perpendicular tangent options now. So I'll select the line tool for this, and now click anywhere in the drawing area to start this line. Now let's assume that I want to make this line exactly perpendicular on this line, but I don't know the point where it will be perpendicular. So in order to find that point, simply press and hold shift key, then right click and select the perpendicular option. Now move your cursor on this line, and here we have it. So click here, press enter, and now this line is perpendicular to this line. So in this way you can use the perpendicular object snap. Obviously you can use this perpendicular object snap also from this menu if you want. Now we have the next one, tangent. So here in this case, let's say that we want to make a line which is tangent on this circle or on this arc and also on this circle. So we want to make a single line which is tangent on both of these geometries. For that, I'll select the line tool. Now I'll press and hold shift key, then right click and select the tangent, and now click anywhere on this circle. So here we have this line. Now once again press and hold shift key, then right click, select the tangent. Now click on this circle and here we have it. So we have a single tangential line which is tangent on this and this geometry. Similarly, let's assume that we want to make a line which is parallel to any existing geometry. So in this case, I'll erase these two geometries and also this one. And now we want to make a line which is parallel to this one, starting somewhere from inside this polygon. For that, I'll select the line tool. Now click at the midpoint here, or let's say that we don't want to click at the midpoint, we'll click at some other point randomly somewhere here. Okay, now we don't know the exact direction of the parallel line. So we want to make this line exactly parallel to this one. And for that, I'll select the parallel object snap. So press and hold shift key, right click, select the parallel. Now we want to make it parallel to this line. So go to this line, but don't click, and now move back your cursor. So when you move it back, you will see this small plus sign, the green plus sign, that indicates that a reference has been taken from this line. Now move your cursor, and when the line becomes parallel, this green tracking vector will appear. Now you can click anywhere to make this parallel line, or you can also enter the distance. So let's say that we want to make it of length 50 units. So I'll type 50, press enter and enter again. And we have this line exactly parallel to this one. So we have some other options also. Let's see that also. So here we have this nearest option, which should be turned off in most of the cases. And the nearest option is helpful if you want to click at any point on the curve. For example, in this case, we have an arc, and on this arc, we have some well-known points like the quadrant and the center. But what if you want to click somewhere in between the quadrants? For that, you can select the nearest option. So obviously I'll select the line or any other tool here for now. Now shift and right click, select the nearest option, and now move your cursor, and you'll see this nearest marker. So that will follow your cursor, and on this curve, you can click anywhere and it will exactly snap to this geometry. Now click here and the geometry has been made. And the end point of this line always lies on the circumference of this arc. So in this way, you can select object snap points to snap to any point in the geometry. And if you want to track your existing snap points, you need to ensure that this object snap tracking is on. So for now, we have this option off, and now I'll select this line tool, and now let's say that we want to make a line by taking the reference of any existing object snap points. For example, here we have this endpoint. Now we want to make a line which is somewhere over here, but which is along this line in the horizontal direction. But now when I try to take reference of this endpoint, I don't have any reference here. I'm not able to make any line exactly in this direction unless I make a line here. So if you want to take reference of this, simply click on this object snap tracking, move back to this point, and now move in this direction, and you'll have this tracking vector. So that will take reference of the existing object snap. So you need to ensure that object snap tracking is on if you want to take its reference. Now here also I'll press enter again. I'll go to this midpoint or the center, but I'll not click, and here we have the reference. You can click here, you can take the reference in vertical direction or in any other direction. So always make sure that this object snap tracking is on whenever you want to take reference of the object snaps, and you can turn it on by pressing the function 11 key on your keyboard as well. So let's move back to the drawing area and press escape key. In this video, I will tell you about the from snap option, and this from snap option may look a little bit intimidating to you in the beginning, but with practice you can use it in a variety of situations, and it will really be helpful in improving your productivity. So here we have a simple geometry. Now in this case, the length of this drawing is 10 units. The height is 10 units. We have this of 5 unit, 5 unit, and the remaining length of this slant line. Now let's assume that we want to make a circle somewhere over here, and we want to take the center of this circle in a predefined way. Now we want the center of this circle to be exactly at a distance of 10 units from the midpoint of this line, and that line, the 10 unit line, should be inclined to an angle of 30 degrees. Now for that, obviously we can make a line here. So we can start a line from the midpoint. We can make it of length 10 units and we can incline it to an angle which is required. So let's say either 30 or 45, we can do that. And then we can make the circle at its end point. So that's one way of doing that. But there is also an alternate method which is from Snap, which does not require you to make any helping line. Now to do that, I'll select the circle tool directly. And now press and hold Shift key. Then right click and select this from option. Now we need to specify the base point. So here you can see that we have a base point option. From base point, we need to specify that. So we need this base point here, the midpoint. Now we need to specify the exact location of that point. So in our case, the point is located at a distance of 10 units and it is inclined to an angle of 30 degrees. And now press enter. And here we have it, the exact point. So now you can enter the radius directly. So let's say that the radius will be 5, press enter. Now let's verify the results. For that, I'll select the line tool. I'll click at this midpoint and I'll join it with the midpoint. Now we need to check two different things. We need to check whether the length of this line is 10 units or not, and also the angle which this line is making with respect to the x-axis is 30 degrees or not. And we can do that directly with a single command, which is di distance, and we'll learn about these inquiry tools later on in this course. So I'll select this command. Now click at the first point and the second point, and now here we have this. The distance is obviously 10 unit. Let's expand this a little bit to see it more clearly. The distance is 10 unit for this line and the angle in XY plane is 30 degrees. So obviously our results are accurate. So in this way you can use from Snap to make these kind of geometries quite quickly. So let's repeat this process, but this time instead of making the circle here, I'll make the circle somewhere inside this geometry. So once again, let's assume that we want to make a circle on this side, and in this case we want the distance to be equal to 3 units from this point, or let's make it 5 units from the midpoint, and it should be in this direction, and the angle which it should make with respect to the x-axis should be 235 degrees. So for that, I'll select the circle tool and once again press and hold Shift key, then right click, select the from Snap option. Now click on this midpoint, and now obviously we need to specify the exact location of that center point, which is at a distance of 5 units. So I'll type at and then distance. We are entering at because we are using the relative coordinate system, and in relative coordinate system we have already selected this point as the origin, so we are entering the end point with respect to this origin. So now the distance is 5 and we need to enter the angle, which is 235 in this case. Now press enter and we have our midpoint. Now only we need to enter the radius, which is 2 in this case. Press enter. Here we have the geometry. So without taking any reference of any line or any other geometry, we can make these kind of geometries quite quickly using the from Snap tool. Now let's have a look at some of the remaining status bar options. So I'll start with the selection cycling option, which is quite helpful in selecting the overlapping geometries. Now in this case, we have this drawing, and in this drawing there may be certain geometries which could be overlapping. So I'll zoom into this area, and now if you notice clearly, we have some overlapping objects here. So some of these objects are overlapping on each other. Now in order to clearly identify that, you can take help of selection cycling. So you can click on this selection cycling option on the status bar to turn it on, and if you're not able to see this option selection cycling, then click on the customization and click this selection cycling option. So make sure that this selection cycling option is active. Now once it is active, go to the status bar, turn it on, and now move back to the drawing area. Now whenever a overlapping object will be found in the drawing, you will see this overlapping square icon right beside the cursor. Now simply click and you'll see a list of all of these overlapping objects. So you can move between the first and second object, and if the list has more objects, you can select those objects also, and a preview will be visible in the drawing area also, as you can see here also. So you can select the objects and you can either erase them or you can do other modifications. In this case, I'll simply erase it. And now we can join both of these endpoints. So I'll use line tool and I'll join these two endpoints. Now we have a clean geometry here. Now similarly, let's move to this part of the drawing, and here we have this circle. Now obviously when I move my cursor to this circle, there is no overlapping icon of selection cycling, but when I move it to this circle, we have this overlapping icon. So that indicates that we have two circles or more than two circles on the same center. So let's click here, and we obviously have these two arcs or the circles. So I'll select the second one, which is obviously not the full arc, and it's completely redundant geometry which is not required. So let's erase it. And here we have it, a clean geometry. So in this way, you can use selection cycling to make selections of overlapping objects. Now let's have a look at other status bar options. So I'll go to this customization and I'll select this coordinates option. So as soon as we activate the coordinates option, you'll see on the status bar here, we have these three coordinates visible: the X coordinate, Y coordinate, and the Z coordinate value. And these values will change with the movement of your cursor. So whenever I move my cursor, the coordinates will update itself, and you can see the real time coordinate values from the drawing area. So in this way, you can make a clever approximation of the coordinates simply by moving your cursor to that area. Now let's look at the next option, which is units. So once again, I'll go to the customization and I'll activate this units status bar option, and I'll also turn off this coordinates. Now when you turn on this units option, you'll see this unit status bar which shows the current display unit, which is decimal in this case. So right now all the dimensions will be shown in decimal units. So that simply means whatever the geometry you make, it will be shown as decimals. So I'll check some of the properties of these objects. So I'll select this circle here and now right click, and I'll go to properties. And now let's have a look at this property palette. Now here we have some of the properties related to this arc or this geometry. For example, we have the radius as 120, 188, start angle, that will be degrees, and the area in square units, and total arc length. So all of these values are currently shown as decimal values. Now let's press escape key and let's change this decimal to architectural. And now let's click on this arc again. Let's look at these properties, and now they are shown as architectural values. Obviously there will be no change in the angles, it's still shown as decimal. And here we have this arc length, area, and all the remaining values. So in this way, you can toggle between the decimal, architectural, or any other remaining options like the engineering, fractional, or scientific, and you can view the values in that unit format. So this is not changing the unit of your actual drawing. This is simply changing the format in which the unit will be displayed. So now let's close this properties palette, and I'll go to the customization and I'll deactivate this units option, and let's click on this quick properties option now. Now using this quick properties option, you can bring a small property palette for every object. Now let's say that we want the property palette for all of these objects which we select. So for that, simply click on this quick properties, and that will activate the quick property option. Now click on any of the object, and this small property palette with some of the important properties or frequently used properties will get listed here. For example, the radius, the coordinates of center point, layer, and all the other information. So you will learn more about this property palette later on in the upcoming modules. So let's close it once again, and let's deactivate this quick properties option, and I'll press escape key. So that was all about the selection cycling and other status bar options, which are really helpful, and they can be used according to your preferences to make your drawing workflow easier. Okay, so here is your question related to the module. Now in this case, you need to make this drawing using all of the commands which you have learned so far. So I'll start this geometry using a rectangle tool. So I'll go to the draw panel, select the flyout and select this rectangle tool. Now click anywhere in the drawing area and then I'll make the rectangle. For making rectangle, I'll type at and then length of rectangle, which is 10. So right now you can see in this drawing that the length is 9 units from the first center point of the fillet to the second center point, but the radius of this fillet is 0.5. That means we have 0.5 unit towards left and also 0.5 towards right. That makes a total of 10 units. So that's the length. Similarly, the width is 4 unit and 0.5 towards upward and 0.5 towards downward will add up to make it of 5 unit length. So I'll type 5 as width. Now here we have it. Now press enter. So that's the rectangle which we need. Now in this rectangle, we need to add fillets first. So to add the fillet, go to this fillet tool, select the radius, and the radius is of 0.5 units. So let's type 0.5 and press enter. Now we need to apply it on all of these vertices. So I'll simply select polyline, click on any of these lines, and there we have it. Now we'll add the geometry which is at the center of this rectangle, and for that I'll go to the line tool. Now click on this midpoint and make a line with length of 2.5 units and press enter. So that will end exactly at the center. Now I'll go to circle, click at this point and make a circle with radius of 3 units and press enter. Press enter again, go to the same point and make another circle with radius of 1.6 and press enter. Now we don't need this line. Also, we don't need this portion, so I'll trim it. So select trim, press enter, click on this part and click on this part. So this portion is complete. Now let's move on to the next portion. Here we need to add another line with length of 2 units. So I'll click on this midpoint and I'll enter a length of 2 unit and press enter. Press enter again to exit this command. Now we need to go to circle tool and click on this endpoint and make a circle with radius of 0.6 unit. Press enter again, and this time again go to the same point and make another circle with radius of 1 unit and press enter. Now we need to make a circle which is tangent on this circle and tangent on this line. So I'll go to the flyout, select tangent radius, and I'll click at this point, then at this point, and enter a radius of 1 unit and press enter. There we have it. Now we need to trim it. So I'll go to trim tool, press enter, click on this point, and there we have it. Now we can make a mirror image. So I'll go to mirror, select this portion, press enter, click on this midpoint and click on the center, press enter again. So now we don't need this part. Also, we don't need this portion. So I'll go to trim tool, press enter and remove this portion. Now we need to make a mirror image of this on this side. So I'll select it all, go to mirror tool, click on the center of this circle and midpoint of this horizontal line and simply press enter. There we have it, the mirror image. Now we need to add a final detail and we can add it by removing these two parts. So I'll go to trim, press enter, remove this portion and remove this portion and press enter. So that's the final drawing which we were required to make.